Hi there, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the final video in the restoration of this SABA Meersburg W3. When I left off last, there were a few challenges to overcome, things to do with the cabinet, things to do with the chassis itself. I had to do the Bluetooth. I had things that are broken that I had to 3D print or replace somehow, and that's what I've been doing. It's taken a while because I've been kind of busy, what with being away from Madeira for a while and all sorts of other stuff, including helping a friend align a SABA remotely. Now that was fun. That was fun. That was a bit of a miracle. But anyway, that's what I've been getting up to, and here's the result. So if you enjoy watching this sort of thing, stick around. There are a few challenges in this that might make you laugh. Stick around, enjoy the video. But before I carry on, I want to thank the sponsor of the video, PCB Way. You'll find them at pcbway.com. And they're the guys I go to for all my PCBs. They've got some amazing prices on prototype PCBs for you. And what I especially like about them is that it's so easy to get this thing done. You can upload a Gerber, go and select the number of units you want, choose the color you desire, and it'll give you an immediate quote as to what this thing is going to cost you. And with the pricing starting at $5, it's really great value for money. But I think this year I'm going to be doing quite a bit more than just PCBs. And for that, I'll probably be visiting their 3D printing services again, because I'm definitely going to be looking at some slightly more exotic 3D prints with materials that I cannot print on my own. The other thing that I find interesting is some of the CNC machining, because sometimes I need parts for the radios that I can't create with the normal materials. So this might come in really handy. But regardless of what it is you're looking for, just look at the list of stuff they do. Whatever you need, I'm sure you'll find something that will satisfy your requirements. With the sound quality that I expect from this radio when I've got those speakers in, it's obvious that I want to add Bluetooth. Now, when I add Bluetooth, each radio is different. And this is a case in point. I have my Bluetooth board, which I'll show you in a second, but it's where you wire it up that's important. Now, there are two things you need to consider. One is wiring up the audio. In other words, the audio coming from the Bluetooth module to the radio. Where is it going to go exactly? And in this case, there are two options. And also, where do I get my 6.3 volts AC from? Now remember, I've got to get 6.3 volts and 0 volts from the heater supply to that Bluetooth board. Now this is where things got a bit tricky on here. You've probably all seen my Bluetooth board. It's a board that receives one of these little cheap Bluetooth modules, and it's made up of a power supply that obtains its source from or uses as a source the 6.3 volts heater voltage, produces the 5 volts for that, and it also has a little booster amplifier with an op amp in here, and this one has a voltage doubler that also uses the 6.3 volts AC from the heaters. Now Bluetooth is obviously digital, and what I don't want is I don't want this thing to be on when I'm listening to radio. In other words, I want to be able to switch it on only when I'm using the phono input, which is where this audio signal is going to. It's going to go into the phono input, and to hear Bluetooth you must click phono, okay? This thing is to make sure that the audio level from your Bluetooth is equivalent to the audio that you would have been hearing on the radio. So you're listening to FM, you select Bluetooth, you don't want it to suddenly go down and have to put the volume up, which is what happens with the boards, these little boards by themselves. Now, this is all fine and good, and I've actually gone one step further. I wanted to have this thing switched off automatically, and most of these radios have this function where when you select phono, the supply to the Magic Eye disappears. It goes away. And so I designed this little board, which takes the high voltage there that feeds the Magic Eye, so that when it goes away, it supplies 6.3 volts to that board. In other words, it will cut out the 6.3 volts when the Magic Eye is on. Okay? I've done a little project on this. I'll link it below in the description, so you can have a look at that. Now this board can be used by itself. You supply 6.3 volts over there, and it can also be used with this, which fits sort of on the side like that. I did that video where I showed you how I use this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail there. And I expected to use this as well, but there's one problem. In this particular radio, the Magic Eye does not get switched off when you select phono. So my use of this is not possible, and I had to find a way to do this, and I've done this in various ways there. You can have a little switch that is made when you push the selector on the phono, a physical switch, a little contact that will make when you select phono. I've used all sorts of methods, but this one came with an interesting ready-made solution. Let me show you what I mean. You may recall that I mentioned that all these buttons here, all these piano keys, are illuminated underneath with little dial lamps, little light bulbs. So there's one here on the phono as well. And this is interesting because the way these lights light up is that you've always got 6.3 volts over there. And the way the light goes on is that when you push this button, when you select it, it brings that shaft of the piano key in contact with this little lever over here. And that makes your ground. See that? It makes ground. And by making ground, it provides 6.3 volts to that light bulb over there. So we've got a ready-made switch on here. When this is off, when the radio is on, when any of the functions of the radio on and the phono is off, that light bulb is off. So there's no 0 volts over there. When you select it, all the others go off and that one goes on. And so I can use this switch as the switch for the ground. And actually, I've just realized I'm being stupid. I can use it for the 6.3 volts as well, obviously. I can connect the 6.3 over here. I had currently put it to the Magic Eye tube itself, but I can connect it over here. So I've got 6.3 volts switched when I select phono. Brilliant. So this is going to come off here and it's going to go right onto there, which is a 6.3 volt supply for the dial lamp. All right, makes it even better. So that sorts out the switching, meaning that we don't have noise when we're listening to radio because the Bluetooth module is completely off. And as for connecting the audio, where's the signal going to go to when I select Bluetooth? I've got the ground wire connected to the common ground over here. Now there are two inputs here, the one at the back and the one in the front. The one at the back is the one with the lower gain. Remember I mentioned that this thing's got 2 gain stages for the preamp. I want to use the lower gain because my driver or my board has got enough gain. So I soldered it to the back there. So when I select Bluetooth, that's the signal that it's going to receive and pump through into the amplifier. Okay, here we go. I select phono. You can see that it's found Bluetooth, and the Bluetooth that it's found is on my iPad. So now if I push play on my iPad, and this is coming out of that little speaker there. Of course, I've got full control on volume, also bass, and treble. So that's working perfectly. Let's stop that. And you can see the little Bluetooth light is on. Now if I select FM, that switches off. If I select phono again, watch the little light. It goes on, starts looking for the Bluetooth device that it's paired to. It's found it, and I'm ready to play again. Like that. All right. Now what I've got to do is I've got to find a convenient place to pass these wires through to the top, because this is going to be at the top of the radio, somewhere on the cabinet. And I need to pass this through one of those holes over there. I won't make any more holes. I just have to find the most convenient spot, tie it with a few zip ties, and we'll be ready to go. So here we are. I've got the negative there, which is the one that's switched by that lever. I've got the positive there, the 6.3 volts. It's not positive. It's the 6.3 volts AC supply. It's going through there. I've got a zip tie. I'm leaving this all loose because this can all be reversed later on if someone wants to. My audio is now connected sturdily to the back one in the ground. It goes out through a hole in the chassis that was already there. There's a zip tie to give it some strain relief, and it comes out through this hole with a bit of with a zip tie for strain relief again, so it's nice and sturdy, and a few more zip ties for good measure. Comes in there with some more zip ties, and then the lid can go on, ready to be put onto the chassis. All right, good. And now it's time to tackle all these little bits that need doing. And the first one is this one. This shaft was broken. It was completely snapped or broken right flush with that one. This is the one that goes inside that one. It's the one that turns the FM. I couldn't really find a replacement. I don't have a mill, so I couldn't mill one for myself. What I did was I drilled a little hole right in the center of that, which was quite a task because obviously this is steel. But I managed to get a hole drilled right down the center of that. It's about 1 centimeter deep. And then I put a screw in there, cut the head off the screw, and then I wrapped it with heat shrink with glue inside to give it the thickness that it needs for the knob to go on. It's been working. It's probably, well, I don't know how solid this will be, but it is working, and I'm hoping that'll be a permanent solution. The other issue is the knobs. Now, these two back knobs are both fine. This front one is broken, and the one on the right was completely missing. The one on the right being the one that had snapped off the shaft. Now, I found these guys. This is from my Breisgau, which is not a parts set, but it's sitting there on a shelf without a cabinet. So I felt she wouldn't mind if I used them. And there's a solution and a problem. Solution is this thing works perfectly on here because I made that. But on the other side, that's just not going to work because these guys are thinner. The hole is thinner and I needed to go into there and it just won't do that. So I'm going to have to use this one for now till I find a replacement set. Actually, all I need are two front ones because these guys are fine. And I know that I'll find them because they usually do come up on eBay. I'll just have to be patient. And now we come to the elephant in the room. This elephant has been shaved down and redressed, as you can see. And this was such a painful experience that I decided not to film it. It was just, yeah, this was one of the worst ones. And the reason for that was that scraping this thing was incredibly difficult. This lacquer was really hard. And so I decided, I tried all sorts of ways of removing it. And I found that the easiest way, the only way that I could manage it, and it wasn't easy, was to actually heat it up with the heat gun, not let the lacquer bubble, just really heat it up till it's almost bubbling, and then let it cool down, and then scrape it off with that scraper spatula thing, centimeter by centimeter. I finally got this all the way down. It was, yeah, not something I'd like to repeat too soon. And when it was finally down to the veneer, those sections that had lifted really became obvious. And I had to glue them down with wood glue. And then I sanded everything again and again till everything was nice and smooth. And after that, I started applying the varnish. And the varnish I used here is walnut. I used walnut because it is very dark. This thing took about, I think probably about 6 or 7 layers of the stuff. What I would do is I would apply a layer, let it dry, sand it down with wet and dry paper. I started with 600 grit, wet and dry, then apply another layer, let it dry, sand it down, till I got to the final sort of 2-3 layers. And at that point, I was sanding it down with 1200 grit. So it's very fine, just to get this thing as smooth as possible. And I think that came out pretty well. You can still see where the sections were lifted here if you look closely, but otherwise it just looks like part of the wood grain. And this is not perfect and not complete for the simple reason that I could not find that gold trim that goes around the edge here. Now, I've had this before, I've used it before and I ran out, and I can't remember where I got it. I can't even remember what it was called. So that trim would go down here, 2 little strips and 2 at the top. So what I've decided to do is leave it like this. I will search for that trim. I've got to find it and apply the 2 layers. And then after that, I will give it just a few more layers of just clear lacquer on top of that, probably sprayed on, because the spray on leaves you less to sand down later, and then do the polishing and so on. So I've accepted that this is not complete. What I did manage to do, which came out a lot better than I expected, was the little trim at the top that was missing. And the color match is not perfect. This is the trim that I replaced. What I did is I drew the profile of this, various attempts at it till I got it right. And then I 3D printed 2 strips. This had to be done in 2 halves because, you know, it's about 50 or 40 something centimeters wide. That wouldn't fit in one go on my 3D printer. And then I sprayed it with gold spray, with old gold And I think it probably could have done with another layer or two, because you can see this is like a brass, and I sprayed that as well. I sprayed everything the same color, but you can see there's a slight difference between that and that. It's not as obvious here where I'm standing, but it is on the camera. You see what I'm seeing is something more like that. You can almost not tell that the color is different at all. And I was pretty pleased with that. But as I said, not perfect, but good enough for now. So the cabinet got the once over in terms of cleaning on the inside. Everything was washed down. The outside is complete for now. And I had to focus on the speaker system. And this required very little in the front. I did some cleaning. There's not much to remove here. This section is a little bit darker, and I didn't want to go into bleaching it because, again, this is something that looks worse on the camera than what I'm seeing here with this light. So let's focus on the back. As you can see, it looks exactly the same. Why? Because I've done everything I had to do in here. I removed the speaker and looked on the underside, and lo and behold, it does have a tweeter. And these are notoriously bad for, well, basically losing their effect. So what I did is I opened it up. All you got to do is bend those little legs on the side, and this is what you find inside. And then you can see that foam that's just degraded there. Scrape that away and replaced the foam and put everything back. And our speaker is perfect. And I tested it. What you got to do is test that tweeter for shorts, okay? Because that tweeter has usually got high voltage on there. If there's a short in there, which is quite easy, it can happen quite easily, you can burn out something out on the radio. This thing measures perfectly. It just needed some dusting down, very light cleaning, and it is ready to go in the radio. Brilliant. All right, folks, chassis in the cabinet, speakers connected, and I've decided to put the Bluetooth on the back here. See that? So that when it goes in like that, okay, it keeps these wires away from everything, and it doesn't interfere with the antenna rotation. We've got to make sure of that. So let's see if this fits in well. Take the dipole out. It goes over the top, I think. Yep. And then these things clip in here. This back black paint has been replaced or refreshed as well. So it was all repainted. Boom, we're done. 2 screws that go on there, and we are done. And then we can sort out the knobs on the front. And here she is, folks. Looking amazing, amazing compared to what it was in the beginning. I am so chuffed with this. Remember the chipped veneer over there? You can hardly see it now. As I mentioned, this is not the final layer. There will be some more lacquer, but she's looking pretty good. The top trim repaired with a 3D printed version. If you remember, the knobs were broken. They're all good now. And of course that one is temporary, but we'll find a replacement soon enough, and especially for this side over here. And reception is actually pretty good. I've got it on shortwave, middle of the afternoon in Madeira. But that's neither here nor there. Let's listen to FM.
Ainda não. Vai deixando passar algum tempo. Vai jogando ali a favor do tempo. Vai fazendo o arremesso para a zona central, onde está Varton. Árbitro a dizer que foi andando muito.
Outras oficinas de discreta conferência. Atividade multidisciplinar.
This has got a lot of bass.
Espetáculos encenados. Sábado 5 de abril, transmissão de Carlos Costa e João Martins. Domingo dia 6, a Quinta dos Animais.
Brilliant.
Quito e...
Let's go to another strong station here somewhere.
Rita Vian, DJ Sets, Blaze. Mode Selector, DJ Firmeza em back-to-back com Nick Leon.
This is amazing. All right. Really amazing. And of course the Bluetooth is working in there. I've just demonstrated it earlier for you. So I'm pretty pleased with this. I'm actually really relieved that this restoration is done, because it has dragged on for a while, especially because I couldn't get the trim. I didn't find the knobs. You know, I tried to make a knob, didn't come out the way I wanted. So yeah, okay. There's still some things to be done here, but I won't linger on this project any further. I've got quite a few things I want to get cracking on. And believe it or not, I'm going down the rabbit hole of medium wave transmitters again. I did an AM, low power AM transmitter project, or started it. I ended up getting the components I wanted for the improvement. I wasn't really happy with the result. I've subsequently started playing with it again, and I think I'm getting there. So that's the rabbit hole I'm going to be diving into in a few days. I've got a few more projects to start here, some solid state, some tube. But for now, the SABA Meersburg W3 is done. This is the third one I've done, and this one's staying in the collection as well. It's looking really nice and will look even better when I have the trims on. So I do hope you've enjoyed this project, and if you have, click like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. And if you want to support the channel directly, you can do so on Patreon and PayPal. Links are in the description below. Once again, thanks for watching. Bye for now, and most of all, stay sane.